This week, we're going to have a follow-up discussion amongst the hosts about how to follow the spirit of the law when it comes to security and compliance. Really, this is a chance for us to decompress after the great conversation we had last week with Chris Roberts. I think we all had more thoughts and things to say. In our second segment, we're going to discuss security and compliance news, including a lawsuit filed against Salesforce that's actually citing CCPA, how endpoint security is the foundation to cybersecurity. We might mention the Equifax indictment, the new NIST privacy framework, and because it's my show, we're going to answer the question, what is the cost of non-PCI compliance? So join us as we tear down silos and build bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. Today's organizations face an evolving set of security threats and continually changing compliance requirements. As your business grows, privacy concerns only multiply and add to a dynamic set of priorities. Today's organizations need to integrate risk, security, and privacy into a cohesive program. Online Business Systems' team of seasoned security practitioners work closely with you to assess your security posture, policies, procedures, and technologies, providing tailored solutions that are specifically aligned to your business's risk profile and ultimately ensure the protection of your brand. To learn more about Online Business Systems, go to securityweekly.com/online.
Welcome to episode number 17 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded February 11th, 2020. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, coming to you from rainy Pasadena, Maryland. Joining me also remotely online are my co-hosts, Scott Lyons and Josh Marpet. And Mr. Matt Alderman is coming to us live from G-Unit Studios.
Where it is also rainy, by the way.
Oh, is it? At least
Yeah,
it's
up
not
and down the
snow.
coast. That's true. I was in snow again last night. Another de-icing pit delay. That's twice in a row.
Well, welcome, gentlemen. Before we jump into our discussion, I have a few announcements. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st, 2020 at the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World main conference or the World Pass. To get this discount, visit securityweekly.com/ISW2020. Click the registration button to register with our discount code, or you can even hit the schedule button to sponsor a micro interview. It occurred to me that Red Lion is actually going to be at InfoSec World. Scott, what are you guys doing down there?
Yeah, that's a great lead-in, Jeff. We're throwing the CTF down there, and remember, with CTFs, laptops are required, right? And if you check the show notes and keep up with us, we will be releasing the link if you can't make it for a virtual add-on for the CTF. Jeff?
Very cool. Hey, one more announcement. If you're attending RSA Conference 2020, which is February 24th to 28th in San Francisco, you can get a $150 discount if you visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2020. You can go there and also sponsor an interview with us on site at the conference, or register for the conference and get the discount. Scott, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something else about the CTF?
No, it just, it's a really good place to come and hone your skills. Plus, we're going to be throwing a CTF 101 course Monday on site at InfoSec World, Disney Contemporary. We're really excited about it. This is something that InfoSec World has done now for the last couple of years, and we've seen it grow from year to year. So that's really the complete thought there.
And then Paul and I are hosting the Container Security Summit on Saturday, so anybody who wants to participate in that can come down a couple days early in the sunny Florida weather and join us for container security.
What's the summit like? Is it a one-day thing? Is it a half-day thing?
No, it's a 1 day. It's a full day. We have kind of a draft agenda. We're starting to recruit speakers and folks for it now. So if anybody's interested in speaking at Container Security Summit, let Paul or me know. But it's a full day on Saturday agenda, all specific to container security.
Oh, that's very cool, dude. That will be a very popular thing. I'm absolutely positive. That's such a huge topic right now.
Yep, very good.
A lot of Paul's research time.
Yeah.
Paul's been doing his homework, and he's an excitable fellow.
If you're listening instead of viewing us on YouTube, what's the Security Weekly link again? Please go and check it out. Jeff, what's that link?
ISW 2020 /
securityweekly.com/ISW 2020.
I built the link, so I know it.
That'll get you to the InfoSec world. That'll get you to the ability to do a micro interview.
Yes.
That'll get you to the ability to sign up for the CTF, I think. And will that get you to the CFP, the call for papers for your Container Security Summit?
They'll see the summit. They can just email me or Paul if they want to. If somebody wants to speak. Like I said, we've got an agenda, a couple panels, some speakers, looking for a case study from a customer. So yeah.
Very cool.
So, hopefully we'll all see you at InfoSec World 2020. I wanted to, and full disclosure, we did have an interview scheduled today that had a late cancellation, so we are officially in wing it mode. But I thought it would be appropriate today to sort of decompress a little bit amongst ourselves. We had an incredible talk last week with Chris Roberts. Chris, again, thanks for joining us in studio for a conversation. But we covered a lot of ground. We talked about a lot of things. But one of the themes that sort of emerged, if there was a takeaway, was this idea of that in security and perhaps in compliance and in risk as well, because all three of these things came up, we need to, or it's important to focus on the spirit of the law in as much, if not more than, the letter of the law. I mean, I know that is particularly true when it comes to the PCI compliance world, but I thought we could take some time to talk amongst ourselves today, to get just any impressions, lingering thoughts, things that you wanted to say that you didn't get to add in last week from the discussion, but also hopefully just take a few minutes to sort of brainstorm amongst ourselves about what does this thing called following the spirit of the law look like as it applies to security mandates, compliance mandates, and even risk-based approaches to security. Anybody have any initial thoughts? Want to jump in?
I do actually. I wanted to talk.
Everybody at once.
Sorry. I wanted to talk about this because I really think we need to go a little deep on this. And by that, I mean, when we were talking with Chris, we talked about methodologies. We talked about how to do security. We talked about how security is done, poorly, well, every iota of the spectrum in between. And one of the things we talked about and touched on, and you mentioned the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, is the why. Why do we do security? Why do we do compliance? And for us who live in this world, if you will, we do it because it's the right thing to do, because we can see patently with our own eyes, oh my God, if you don't do security, you're in so much trouble. If you don't perform compliance, you're in so much trouble. But it was fascinating. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because yesterday I was in Orlando at the Franchise Association show. This is for franchisors and franchisees. And they talk about how to build more business and how to build a franchise. And they have meetings and get-togethers and all this kind of stuff. And it was fascinating to me, primarily because this was exploratory for us. I went there as Red Lion, and it was exploratory for us to see if they care. Like, is there a market there effectively? This was market research, if that makes sense. And the answer I got was not comforting. They don't care. The franchisors and the franchisees. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great, because franchisors have data and franchisees have data. And to be clear, franchisors are the people that own franchises and sell franchise locations to other people. Okay. So the owner of Staples, for example, sells a Staples location here and there and everywhere. Okay. And I'm not picking on Staples, it's just the first franchise I can think of. I don't even know if they're a franchise, but you get the idea. and McDonald's. I'm sure there's a franchise there, et cetera, et cetera. So the franchisors have data, the franchisees have data, and you'd think that they'd care about each other's data because there are some data that's common and we want to protect all of it, et cetera, et cetera. And to a large extent, I found that most of the franchisors and franchisees don't really care. They're so wrapped up in sales, which I get. You got to make sales to live. It's a fact of life. But they have a less than it matters attitude, or less than understanding. They don't know enough to know that this is something they should be concerned about or prioritize, if that makes sense. So
it makes sense, Josh. You're trampling very directly into PCI territory. And when I was a QSA, I dealt with quite a few franchisee relationships, and they're even weirder when it comes to like gas stations. But that's another topic for another day. The problem that I saw was that too often, a franchisee is essentially a small merchant because they're independently owned and operate. They don't qualify for all the love and attention that you get from going through a QSA-led PCI assessment. They're in the category of self-assessing, and in fact, very often they are getting their point of sale systems, their cash registers, from what is called a payment processor or a payment provider that says, hey, just use our stuff. We'll charge you X percentage or a fraction of a dollar transaction, and we'll take care of all of it for you. So they don't even think about it at all. The problem being that they're carrying a brand name that's very often a nationally recognized brand name, if not internationally recognized brand name. Case in point, I think it was shortly after I went to Tenable, so it was probably 2014-ish. Dairy Queen suffered a breach. It's happened. Jimmy John's. It's happened to quite a few franchisees.
Oh no, they know my preference for blizzards. Oh God,
that's right. But Dairy Queen in particular, I remember reading a story about it because when it was a Dairy Queen franchise or set of franchises, because very often a franchisee might own every Dairy Queen, for example, in a city or in some sort of geographic region. They were the ones that were breached, and I think reporters, the press, went to Dairy Queen for comment. What are you going to do about it? Their initial response was, hey, it's not us. We don't care. That very quickly changed because they did figure out that it was sort of there was a brand reputation that came into play, if for no other reason, but they should get involved. But the bottom line is franchisees are by definition typically small merchants. They're not subject to they're supposed to be following PCI, but nobody's really keeping after them about it. Nobody's checking them, versus the large name brand, corporate back end franchise, which very typically also isn't doing PCI because they're not really doing the buying and selling. That's all the franchisees. So it's sort of a catch-22 in that sense.
But the point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Matt.
You guys have hit this on multiple ways without actually saying it. It's the statement after your hyphen in the description, risk-based security. It's about risk, right? The why is, if you don't understand what your risks are and what you're trying to protect and how do you protect it, how are you ever going to get to that answer? And risk has to play in this discussion, I think, in order for, whether it's a franchisor, franchisee, or anybody, what are the risks if something goes wrong? Does it have an impact to my brand? Does it have an impact to my revenue? Does it have an impact to my growth? These are all business risk discussions that when you understand those risks, then you can look at what aspects of compliance or security should I be implementing to reduce that risk, right? That's really where the conversation should go. But again, back from the spirit of the law, which is reduce risk, minimize that risk exposure, to the letter of the law, which is here's my checklist of all the things I need to do so I don't have to deal with it. That's where the gap in still exists, I think, in this space.
Well, let's pause a minute and because you just proposed a definition of spirit of the law, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but you put the spirit of the law in the context of managing risk. Is that what we want to go with? I mean, if we say spirit of the law, I guess which law are we referring to? I mean, is there a different perspective of spirit of the law based on where you're coming from, whether it's risk, whether it's compliance, or whether it's security?
Let's ignore the law for a second. Seriously, like
Okay.
there's so many frameworks. Sorry?
No, let's ignore the law.
Let's ignore the law, like the fact that there is a written law for just a second. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
I know, Jeff. Just ignore PCI for a minute. It's okay. It'll still be there for you when you get back. So let's talk about the right thing to do. Okay. What's the right thing to do for a company? They have to balance their risks and threats with their costs that they pay to protect against those risks. So are we vaguely okay there for just a minute?
I am.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's the right thing to do. So what we're seeing and what we're talking about is we're having to write laws to enforce the right thing to do. And people, companies, organizations are ignoring those laws. So we're talking about the spirit of the law, the letter of the law. Just let's ignore the law, the written manifestation of the right thing to do just for a minute. Are companies doing the right thing? And my answer is most of them aren't.
No, they're not, because I think they look at the revenue side, they look at the financial side, but they don't think about protecting employee data, customer data, et cetera, right? They get enamored with the money side of the equation, that they don't think about the cost side or the consequences of not protecting certain elements of data.
I agree with you, but I'm going to push back a little bit on the enamored point you made. And the reason I'm pushing back on that is because in this day and age, let's talk a public company just for a minute, because it's easy to discuss this with a public company setting. If you have an earnings call and you haven't made the expectations of the analysts, your board is pissed. Your market cap could go down. Your bonus goes bye-bye. You lose your job more than likely. It's awkward as heck at the very least. So realistically, it's not that they're enamored. It's that they're disincentivized to care about spending money. They're disincentivized to spend money on something that is not directly related to increasing revenue. Can we agree on that too?
Or profit, yes, agree.
Profit.
Both top line and bottom line, but yes.
It's not that they're enamored of it. I mean, obviously they like making money, but it's that they have a perverse incentive. Their perverse incentive is make money at any cost. And that's a problem. So the only way to reverse or fight that perverse incentive is to fine the living hell out of them when they have a problem, when they have a breach, when they have an issue, so that it directly impacts their revenue. That's the only thing we found so far, as far as I know, that makes a difference. Oh, no, it's not true, because in SOX, you have the CEO and CFO signing off. They can legitimately go to jail if they screw up. So there's jail time or profit impact on profit. Those are the only two.
But wait.
Seen that enforced. Hold on, time out. With SOX, how many times has that been enforced?
I don't honestly know.
Yeah. I mean, how many people have gone to jail for a 302 or 404 violation, right? Have we really seen it? Not really. I mean, a lot of this came out of Enron and some of the financial stuff. Okay, so now it's in law, but are we really enforcing that law? So we could take lots of examples, but let's take GE for a second. GE imploded on itself in late 2018 to 2019. Did anybody go to jail? I don't think so. Was there a violation in financial reporting? Yeah, probably. So even the teeth in Sarbanes-Oxley, maybe not. You said something is revenue at any cost. I want to rephrase that. It's revenue at as minimal cost as possible, because that's how you drive the profitability side, right? So
valid. You know what I mean, though.
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Yeah. So I have to. It's coming back to me, Josh. PCI was still there. Ask me how many companies have been fined for non-compliance. How many companies that have been breached where the executive management has turned over. People haven't gone to jail, but people certainly have lost their jobs. There's certainly have been millions in fines, replacement costs. We have a story in the news segment. I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but it's in the wiki about considering all the costs of non-compliance with PCI.
But
but
hold on.
There are consequences.
There are,
in a PCI
but they're short-lived. So let's look at Target. Let's look at Home Depot. Let's look at their stock, right? Their stocks took a dip, but they all recovered, and they're all higher than they were before that breach and before all those payouts of penalties. Let's look at the Facebook $5 billion fine for the whole privacy issue with Facebook. It was a drop in the bucket. They don't care. They haven't changed their ways. It was a $5 billion fine, but Facebook's still growing. They're still making money hand over fist. I don't even think these fines work.
I got 2 words for you. Ashley Madison. Okay? What happened with them? They were at 34 million users, and that number was fabricated. And then after the breach, they were at 37 million users. Unfortunately, whether it's good news or it's bad news, it's still PR, right? It doesn't matter, right? You look at these companies like Target, like Home Depot, like Equifax, right? What the heck happened with Equifax and PCI? They were fined, but due to the insider trading, executives left with a buttload of money, as it's been purported, right? So where are we holding?
No, I think some of those guys will go to jail eventually, but.
Good in my opinion, but that's my opinion.
But it'll be comfy jail.
Yeah,
it'll be
white collar jail.
Lovely golf jail.
Yeah,
it'll be country club jail.
Yeah, golf club jail.
My wife did a lot of statistics work in college. She majored in criminal justice and studied cybercrime, and she was studying the effects of breach on companies. And she did a study on this, and it was a couple of years ago. She just saw an updated version of that study at ShmooCon, and she was like, wow, I wish I had been able to do that level of detail when I was in school doing this. But the gentleman that did the study actually matched the stock prices and market caps to the breach and how big the breach was, how many records were lost, et cetera. And it was literally, there's no effect or a positive effect on having a breach. So again, let's go back to the basics. Why should a company do the right thing? I don't have an answer. Literally, I have no idea.
So
go back even further.
A lot of companies
Nobody cares.
Well, hold on there, because it seems that the best way to wrangle a company is to affect their bottom dollar, right? Tie it to money, right? So the real question is not how do we put in appropriate controls. The real question is how do we put in appropriate fines for control misalignment. Right.
But,
it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. What if there was a way to incentivize companies to do the right thing?
Like less regulation and more opportunity for growth? We kind of reverse the incentives.
I like it. How do we do a positive incentive on a company? This is awesome idea.
Well, in the PCI world, what I'm aware of is, when you're a merchant and you're dealing with the cost of doing business, the cost of, using credit cards, whether it's Visa, MasterCard directly or one of the payment processors like First Data, you are incentivized by paying less per transaction. Or at least that's the potential. So, I mean, it's built into the transaction. Typically you're either paying pennies on the dollar, you're paying a flat percentage based on the transaction. You can do better if you're doing more of the things that you're supposed to be doing in terms of protecting credit card data.
Yeah, the question, I guess, Jeff, is there enough incentive for that reduced transaction fee to really make a difference versus the amount of money they'd have to spend to get to that level, right? That's going to be the balancing act that every organization is going to make, to say it's going to cost me X, I got to save Y, and if X is bigger than Y, then I'm not doing it.
Yeah, but you're still talking about risk appetite.
Yes.
This reminds me of the cyber insurance stuff that Scott, you and I dealt with a while back.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about cyber insurance, but I'm going to make this 30 seconds or less. But when we talk to brokers, we ask them if we can get you a way to reduce your claim percentage. Would you care? No. We get paid on policies signed. We don't care about claims.
Right.
So we talk to underwriters. If we can reduce your claims percentage, would you care? Not really. We hedge our bet with reinsurance companies, and we're not technically sophisticated enough to understand. So we don't care. So we pad the premium so that we can, cover for our lack of knowledge and lack of caring. All right. We go talk to reinsurance companies. They're like, yeah, we'd love to. We just don't know. We don't have any access to the customers. So it's the same way. The incentives in this industry are all screwed up. And that's, I think, the core of it. I think we've really hit the core of this problem. And I don't know how to fix it.
It's almost like there needs to be legislation put into place that pushes insurance companies either through a monetary fine, jail time, whatever, or a positive incentivization to push their clients through compliance regimes, right? Tie it all back to the insurance company who's selling the policy, right? And it's like that needs to happen or something.
There's the start of that already. Do you know the Safety Act? The Safety Act.
What is it?
The government legislation that says that if your product, so the product company would register their product under this, get it tested, whatever. If your product is registered, tested, certified by the Safety Act, and there's a terrorist act that your product can stop, it puts a ceiling on the liability that somebody can sue you for using your product and it didn't stop something. Okay. So in terms of cyber terrorism, it puts a ceiling on your liability, which obviously helps with your cyber insurance premiums and so on and so forth. But it's fairly limited. You have to certify your product under it. Okay, that's fine. That I don't mind. But then it's only for cyber terrorist or terrorist actions. Terroristic actions? I don't know the proper.
Yeah, but if you could do the same thing and limit liability from a consumer or a customer perspective, there would be potential incentives there because it would cap how much payout you'd have. If you could prove that you had certain security controls and risks managed and mitigated appropriately, there could be some stuff. But if you think about, in the U.S. anyways, if you think about our legal system, our legal system's not incentivized the same way. See, we can sue anybody for any amount of money with very little impact if I lose the case or not, right? So I don't think you can get to this concept without major tort law reforms that changes the incentive systems for the legal systems under lawsuits. Because if you brought a frivolous lawsuit and you couldn't prove your case and you were responsible for the cost, completely different discussion, right? Then you could look at limitation of liability clauses as an incentive factor to limit what your exposure is. But that's not the way our system's set up today.
Oh boy, you're right.
Let me. I'm sort of dovetailing off of what Matt just said, but I want to ask a question. It's sort of shifting gears, but it's sort of not. Maybe. I was thinking about this morning. We often talk about the maturity of organizations, and when I think of organizations that have mature security programs, specifically, I tend to think of financial services, banks, perhaps to some degree insurance companies. What is, and this is a question I have for all of you guys in your experience, what are the things that are indicators of organizations that have mature, what we would consider to be mature security within the organization? What are the how did they get there? Why are they mature? And think about what they are, throw some things out. Maybe there's some common denominators.
They're big
that we can build off of.
They're big. They're regulated.
They have the purse strings to put it towards research and development of security programs that A, hit the basics, B, hit compliance models, right? C, have an advanced threat or a forward-facing component, right? And then D, are able to protect the human component, and that has a whole bunch of controls behind it as well.
But if you think about the financial services industry, because I spent a lot of time in my early compliance GRC days in the financials, Graham Leach Bliley was the thing, right? It gave the banks the ability to do insurance and other products that allowed them to grow their businesses. And we've seen all these banking areas grow. But to sell those products, they also went under a regulatory regime, right? Now, you've got multiple regulators in the financial space, and some regulators are better than others, right? The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency for the national banks, probably one of the most strict versus maybe the FTC or SEC in other areas. So you've got a lot of different regulatory bodies, but that regulation is what forced a level of maturity, Jeff, I think, on these banks because they got the opportunity to grow their businesses substantially. And so they knew that they were going to get more revenue, so they made some investments to keep the regulators off their backs. But it took years from the time Graham Leach Bliley came out in 99. I was doing this back in 03, 04, and we were still in the early days of those curves, those maturity curves of getting programs in place that could withstand the regulators coming in and scrutinizing those. You didn't see that in HIPAA, unfortunately, just because there wasn't teeth in the early days of HIPAA, and it took the health cares a lot longer to get there. But so regulation actually worked in that particular case.
Well, but wait. Regulation worked because it opened up opportunity streams.
It did
with those financial institutions. The one of and that's a great positive incentivization that comes along with, hey, we can be more secure. And we get access to these other revenue streams.
Right.
And this is the kicker, and this is the big factor, I think. I'm sort of throwing it out there. It positively impacts our brand.
If you say enabler, I'm drinking.
It positively impacts our brand.
Enabler.
And this is where HIPAA didn't have the same incentive. See, by moving to electronic health records and doing the transportability, there was no additional revenue per se for the hospitals, really. It was a bunch of new regulations on top of what they were already doing. They didn't have an opportunity necessarily to grow the revenue streams, which is why HIPAA had a completely different impact and effect, I think, to that industry than what happened with Graham Leach Bliley.
So what we're saying is two things. On the positive side, on the positive incentivization side, if regulation comes with a way to add more revenue streams, lines of business, increase your revenue, decrease your costs, whatever, these regulations will be probably maybe not welcomed, but at least, okay, that's cool, we can do it. On the negative side, if a breach will impact a brand that is so well known and so valuable, if the brand has a massive value in and of itself, the brand of Goldman Sachs, the brand of JP Morgan Chase, the brand of these large national companies, they care because it's going to impact their revenue in massive ways. So that's the only two factors I think we've come up with so far, is a positive incentivization by regulation opening up revenue and a negative incentivization on the larger companies by saying it's going to impact your brand.
I think, Josh, you've done a pretty good job summarizing our discussion. We need to take a break, and we'll come back and talk some security and compliance news.